Well, I'm with Gabrielle Dolan today, and she is a world-leading expert on business storytelling. Over the last 10 years or so, she has taught thousands of people all over the planet how to use storytelling in business to boost their ability to communicate and to lead. And her clients are based in Melbourne, London, Sydney, Malaysia, and lots of other places as well. Ral, actually, maybe we should explain why I'm starting to call you Ral.
Thanks, Stacey. Yeah, people get a little bit confused when I go from Gabrielle to Ral. They think it's two different people, but I've been called Ral all my life, and the simple story is that my younger sister couldn't pronounce my name, and she'd say Gabrielle, and Ral has just stuck for my entire life.
I like it. I never think to call you Gabrielle. So everyone, I'm calling Ral from now on.
Yeah, and it beats Gabby.
Yeah, I think you once gave me a warning of what would happen to somebody if they called you Gabby.
Did I? I'm sure I did it friendly.
Oh, yeah, of course. I didn't call you Gabby. I was thankful. All right, so Ral, you've published a couple of great books. Hooked, which is filled with real-world examples and really good how-to techniques to teach the skill of great business storytelling. And more recently, you've published Ignite, Real Leadership, Real Talk, Real Results, which is pretty much an honest guide to achieving lasting business success by being a more authentic leader. So how does all this come about? How do you end up becoming this expert in business storytelling?
Yeah, I had an unusual journey. I used to work for the National Australia Bank, and I was there for almost 17 years, rising up to the ranks of senior leadership, and experienced, I guess, firsthand the frustration of communicating and influencing people. I remember I had the pleasure of working with a woman called Merrin Butler, and Merrin, in her previous life, used to work in the NAB's UK division, and she actually lived in London but would fly to Dublin every Sunday night. And I remember once she shared with me a story around, she'd catch the same flight all the time, and as the air hostess was going through the safety instructions, you'd either be reading a magazine or falling asleep, as you're used to if you've done a lot of travel. And on this one particular flight, it was really bad weather, so they had to abort the landing. And they circled around again, and on the second time they had to abort again because the weather was getting progressively worse. And on the third attempt, the captain came on and said, "We will make one final attempt to land, but before we do, we go through the safety instructions one more time." And with that, Merrin said that everyone was asking questions and looking for their life jackets and paying full attention. About 3 or 4 months after that, we were in charge of rolling out a major HR transformation across the NAB that was going to impact, the 600 HR people. And when we brought everyone together, I said to Merrin, "What's the one key message you want to get across to your people?" And she said, "Look, I know what they'll be thinking. Here we go again. Just keep our heads down." She goes, "But the reality is this project is not going to go away. It's going to be a long project. They're going to receive lots of information about it, and it may not always be relevant, but when it is, they need to be paying attention because it's going to impact them, and it's going to impact them personally." So I suggested to Merrin that she use the story about flying into Dublin, and at first she sort of said, "Well, what's that got to do with anything?" I go, "Yeah, it's on message about how we get information, but all the time, but unless it's relevant, we don't take notice of it." So Merrin did share that story with the HR professionals, and it was the first time I sat back and observed the power of someone sharing a personal story and attaching it to a business message. And I remember thinking there's something in this. There's something in the power of sharing a sort of everyday personal story and attaching it to your message that you want to get across in business. So that was the start of my journey, and I just noticed that the really good communicators, the really inspiring leaders all used personal stories. So I left the NAB about 11 years ago, and ever since then I've been teaching leaders and subject matter experts and specialists how to use stories to communicate better.
It brings life to communication, I reckon. I mean, you are a good storyteller. I've heard some of them, but that life that it brings is just there's no match for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see it all the time when people are, giving presentations and talking in business, and they're going through their PowerPoint deck and it's the blah, 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 and then they break into a personal story, and it's just the one thing that everyone connects and engages with because, it brings it brings it to life.
I've got an image of campfire in my head, like just how riveting that is when we're all sitting around together, and just we must be hardwired for stories. I don't know, it's great.
Yeah, well, you've hit the nail on the head, Stacey. We are, as humans, we are actually hardwired to tell stories. It's the way we communicate, and we're hardwired to listen to stories. We actually listen to stories differently. So, as a leader, when your key job is to influence and communicate, or as a subject matter expert, your key job is to how do you get your message across? Why would you not use stories?
And this is exactly why I wanted to talk with you and share you with my network of wonderful folk around the world who are interested in the field of organisational measurement. It's you write an email newsletter, and in one of the recent ones you were talking about how this very thing, how subject matter experts struggle to really help other people get their great ideas. And of course, a PowerPoint full of bullet points just doesn't do that. So for us in the field of organisational performance, the kind of great knowledge that we want people to get, to understand, and to really absorb and grab hold of, is stuff about how to write strategic goals so that they're understandable and measurable, and why so many of the KPIs and measures in organisations really aren't that good. We want them to get that measuring what matters can be easier, can be faster, more meaningful, more engaging, that we need to adopt a deliberate process to make all that happen. We want them to get that measuring really matters. It's not a bureaucratic hoop that we have to jump through. But we know that people aren't getting it. Our attempts to get them to do all of this just are falling flat. And we know this because all of these people that we're trying to help are still stuck in these old bad habits in choosing KPIs. So, Ral, can we start with why people just don't get it when we have all these brilliant, gorgeous ideas about strategy and performance? We want to share them with them, but it's just not landing.
Yeah, it's really frustrating, isn't it, when we have brilliant, gorgeous ideas and people don't get it? If anyone has teenage children, they will understand that as well. But look, the reality is we know our stuff better than anyone else. So, we're the experts in things. You and your audience know about organisational performance and measurement better than anyone else. So that's a good thing, but it's a bad thing because that knowledge actually curses us. There's some studies around the curse of knowledge that when we know something so well, that when we're trying to communicate, it's like we assume people get it, that it logically makes sense. And the reality is they don't. And there's a lot of reasons why they don't get it. We are communicating in a way, perhaps using a lot of corporate jargon and acronyms, and they're not getting cut through. Or we're communicating in a way that's really logical, and logic doesn't actually change mindset or behaviour. So we need to communicate in a way that sort of dodges the curse of knowledge and creates a meaningful why for why they need it, and logic unfortunately doesn't do that.
So this sounds like it's our responsibility to help them get it. It's not about them being not listening. It's not about them being obstinate or anything. It's about what we've got to change. Yeah. So what do we do differently?
When I work, look, one of the things when I work with, people across corporate Australia and around the world is this real frustration of why don't they get it? We've communicated, why don't they get it? And my sort of tough love back to them is exactly what you've said, Stacey. It's not their job to get it. It's our job to make them get it, to help them understand it. So, I mean, obviously I'm a, huge supporter on that storytelling is a great way to help people to get it. And storytelling is not about dumbing things down. It's about understanding it so well that you can communicate it in a way that uncomplicates it for the listener.
Makes it something that fits in their current way of seeing the world. They don't have to make too many leaps to try and figure out what we're trying to say to them.
Yeah, it's making it real for them, doing the bridge between, I see how that can work. A lot of the times we just communicate based on logic, and you you would probably experience this a lot. You could go in and give 10 logical reasons why measurement matters, and they probably could give you 10 logical reasons why it doesn't. So just going in, when we just go in on logic, that's when we have that frustration that we're just hitting our head up against a brick wall. So we need story can help us sort of get around that wall or get under it or get over it, but it can certainly help us get through it.
Cool. So we want to let go of the logical arguments. We want to let go of the typical management speak and that kind of language and get to something more real. So how exactly do we make our thing, our particular area of knowledge, how do we make it more relevant and meaningful for people? How do we put it into language that, like you say, gets under that barrier?
Yeah, so one of the ways we can do that is with story. But before I just want to reiterate, though, that the logic is still important. You obviously still need all the logical reasons, but we just don't want to lead with it all the time. We just don't want to be the only thing we're communicating. So how we can communicate through story that creates an emotional connection. So it does really talk about the why we're doing this. It creates a purpose. It helps them see things in a different mindset. And these stories can be, they're not necessarily case studies, because case studies are still quite logical. So I'm not talking about you just presenting information about another organisation that has done, organisational measurement and the results they've had. Those case studies are absolutely valid, but they're not stories. I run a business on storytelling, and I absolutely use case studies, but we need to be aware that case studies are still very much based in logic. So these stories I'm talking about is how you can use personal stories to create an emotional connection. So similar to what I talked about in the introduction, where Merrin used a story about flying into Dublin and having to abort the landing to get her message across about the importance of information being relevant at the time. So it's the day-to-day stories that can be really powerful.
Cool. Is there a recipe or some kind of structure for how we can kind of take an experience from our life and put it into a story that's going to line up well with the kind of points that we want to make?
Yeah, look, there is a science to it. So I often talk about there's an art and science to storytelling in business, because I'm sure we've all seen storytelling in business done very, very badly. The key is you have to be really clear on what the message is. So one message, one story. So this isn't going to be you're going to come up with one story and it's going to solve all your problems. It's going, okay, what's the message I want to get across? So it might be that measurement matters, for example. What's the message? Who's the audience? And then the best way to find a personal story is ask yourself, what does this feel like outside of work? What does measurement that matters feel like outside of work? And it can be the day-to-day things. And then once you've got an example of what this feels like outside of work, so I'm just on the fly here thinking of, would be numerous baking examples, or when you're training for a marathon and you're trying to keep your personal best. There'd be a whole lot of examples of where we measure stuff outside of work because it matters to us.
Yeah.
So you take that example, so you think, oh yeah, I think I've got a story around that, and then you put it through a structure. And the structure I follow is 2,500 years old. It comes from Aristotle, and Aristotle said that we need a beginning and a middle and end when we're telling stories. So just pure genius right there. But there's a couple of ways to make your story really effective. First of all, when you share a story in business, they should only be about 1 or 2 minutes long. So this isn't about sharing a story that's going on for 5 or 10 minutes and people are either thinking or saying, just get to the point. So there's got to be some real discipline to make sure your stories are only about 1 or 2 minutes long. And I might just take you through a couple of tips of how you start your story, what you put in the middle and what you put in the end. Would that be useful?
Absolutely, please. Yeah,
okay. So the way you start your story is with time and place. So time and place is a really natural start to the story, and it could be as vague as when I was a kid, I grew up on a farm, or this morning at gym, or 3 weeks ago I went on a holiday to America. So what time and place does, it signals to your audience that you're about to tell them a story. And as I mentioned previously, we're actually hardwired to tell stories. So now I'm listening to you completely different than what I was just before. So it gets right into your story really quickly. In one sentence, you've set it up.
Cool.
And then you get into the middle part of your story, and this is where all the action happens. And just a couple of tips for the middle part. If you're introducing a character to your story, so for example, it could be about your kids, name your kids. If it's about your partner, name them. If it's about your best friend from school, Jono, name them. So it's all about naming your characters, bring them to life. You don't have to name every single person you mention in your story, but you just name the main one or two characters. The middle also is where you have to have a real discipline of what detail you put into the story and what you leave out. And you do that by constantly going back to what your main message is. So is this relevant to the message you're trying to get across? If it is, leave it in. If it's not, take it out. And you've got to have that discipline all the way through, or else your stories will end up being, 5 or 10 minutes. And when your stories are that long, it's sort of, the stories then become about you and not about helping them get it. And remember, this is the whole reason we're doing this, is to help them get it.
Of course.
So you have to have some real discipline around what you put in and what you leave out. And then the other thing in the middle, and what makes a story a story, it has to have some emotional context. I've got to feel something and I've got to visualize something. So just the language we use. When you're sharing a personal story, this is no place to be using corporate jargon or acronyms. You've got to use real language. Like, you don't want to be saying things like, I was anxious, when the reality is you were, scared out of your pants. So say that type of stuff to bring your stories to life. And just enough, visual information to set context so people can actually picture your story. So that there's a few tips in the middle. And then when you get to the end, there's 3 parts to the ending that are really critical, and the ending is the hardest bit. The 3 parts to the end are the bridge, the link, and the pause. And what the bridge is, it's just a simple sentence that takes the listener from your personal story to a work context. And it's just something along the lines of, I'm sharing this with you because it reminds me of measurement. And then you go, okay, this is about measurement. Or I'm sharing this with you because it reminds me of where we're at now in the organisation. That's the bridge. And then the link, which is the final sentence of your story, should link to the purpose. So again, it could be along the lines of, just imagine the difference we could make if we all took measurement seriously, or just imagine what we could achieve if. And it's got to be somehow linked to your story. And then the final part of your sentence is the pause. The final part of your story, rather, is the pause. After you've finished sharing your story, you should just be silent for 1 or 2 seconds, because that's when people make their own personal connection to what you've said.
That really is a recipe, Rel. That's awesome.
It is a recipe. It's funny. I do a lot of work, with like engineers and bankers and technical people, and they go, oh, all our people are really technical and logical, and I go, well, that's good, because I take them through a very logical process to help them develop their stories.
I love it. All right, so I'm gonna put myself on the spot here, and I'm gonna do not a 1 or 2 minute story, but something a bit faster, just to see if I can quickly do this. So, all right.
Yep. Okay. You're a fast learner.
So one message, one story. The message that I want to get across in a measurement context is why focusing on targets isn't always a good thing. So I practice slacklining, which is this strip of webbing that you string between, and I string it between 2 fence posts, and it's loose and bouncy, and you've got to walk on it like a tightrope, but it moves around. It's not stiff like a tightrope. It's really hard to do.
Yep.
So when I'm standing on it, like I get 1 foot up there and I'm shaking all over the place and it's freaking me out, and I'm wondering if I'll be able to get my other foot up there and balance for even a fraction of a second. So I set this target that I wanted to walk the length of this about 10 metres of slackline. And what I found was, whenever I thought about walking the 10 metres, I couldn't even get my second foot on there. But when I just breathed and let go and forgot about the target and simply practiced standing up 1 foot at a time, 1 foot down, 1 foot up, 1 foot down, 1 foot up, balancing a little bit longer. And before I knew it, I was walking the length of the slack line, but only after I let go of this idea of walking the length of the slack line. So in a work context, we do this. We set these targets for doing something faster or doing something more accurately, and we think about the target and trying to hit the target every week or every day, and we get all freaked out. And I reckon what we need to do is, fine, it's okay to have the target, but once we've set it, we've got to forget about it and look back down at the job we're doing and just learn by doing it and getting better by doing it, and just, letting it happen when it's supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love it. So do you want me to give you a little bit of feedback?
Please. Yeah.
Feedback in front of your whole audience. So it's really, to make that up on the fly like you've just did is brilliant. It's the common mistake you've made is what the vast majority of people do, and the ending starts to feel a little bit directive as opposed to inviting. So the story was perfect. I would almost said, in your story be saying what you said. Once I realised if I just let go of the targets and just breathed and enjoyed it, I made it across the slack line. Is it the slack line?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you could share your story, and then I would end it by simply saying something along the lines of, I'm sharing this with you because it reminds me of how often we get caught up in targets in a business setting, and imagine what we could achieve if we let go of the targets and just focused on making it to the other side, or
Awesome.
something like that.
Awesome. I love it.
So the ending's got to be all your messages have to be in the story. So your messages around when I realised if I just let go of the targets, I would, walk across it, and I felt better, and I was really excited when I made it. All that stuff's in the story, and then when you get to the end, it's almost just a wrap around and making the ending very inviting. So even the words I use, imagine what we could achieve.
Yeah.
So even though it's them, even though you're talking to them, using the words like imagine or just think what we could do, it makes it very, very inviting.
Inviting, and that is probably a really powerful word to start wrapping this up on, Rel, because that's what we want. We want to invite people to our ideas and definitely not push our ideas onto them.
We don't want to be ramming stuff down people's head, because we all know what that feels like, and we all reject it.
We do. Groovy. Okay, Rel, let's wrap up. I would like I'd like for people to know how to get hold of your books. Can we start with that? Where do they find info about your books?
Yeah, look, probably the best. I mean, all my books are available on Amazon and all the normal bookstores and online, but the best place is if you go to the website at GabrielleDolan.com. They're all links through to the Amazon sites from the website, so they're all there.
Great, and I'll put links in the notes for the podcast as well, so people can get to them. And those books for everybody again are Hooked, and the second one.
So Hooked is how leaders connect and engage and inspire with storytelling, which is all on storytelling, and Ignite is about real leadership, real talk, real results, and that's still got a lot of good stuff in there around storytelling, but around authentic leadership, and also a lot about how you present and pitch during authentic leadership. And I've got a couple of online programs. So I've got an online business storytelling program that your audience may be interested in, but again, that's all on the website as well.
Excellent. And your website URL again is Gabrielle Dolan?
Yeah, just www.gabrielledolan.com.
Excellent. That's good. Rel, thank you a million for spending some time with us so that we can learn how to help people get our ideas using storytelling. And thanks for the impromptu coaching. We hadn't planned for that, but that was fun.
We did not plan at all. You did a good job. Lucky you weren't really, really bad at it, because it could have been embarrassing.
No, not at all, because it would have made even better content for people. They would have learned even more.
It would have.
That's cool. That was a tremendous help, Rel. Thank you so much. And everybody, I hope you have got some practical ideas now to start playing with to influence your colleagues to measure what matters most.
Thanks, Stacey.